When I was younger, I loved to read. I'd open up a book and enter another world, and I'd fall so deeply into that world that real life seemed to slip right out of focus. Technology, stress, and daily routine became a blur. The words on the page built new walls for me to feel at home. I would step into another character's shoes and live multiple existences. But for some reason, those worlds have been left waiting for me on a bookshelf, unopened. What was once a love of mine has now become another to-do left unticked. I stopped reading. I didn't stop cold turkey. I think in the last year I've read maybe 3 or 4 books, but I used to read a lot more than that. And look, I know it's not about the number of books you read. I really don't like those sort of challenges, but I used to be someone who would put a book down and be so excited to read the next one, whereas these days it feels like I really have to push to finish a book. And I really hate that. I really want to reclaim my love of reading because it's something that I genuinely miss. And so if you're the same and you also are struggling to finish books, let's try to figure out why we've stopped reading and how we can overcome it. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm looking for a book to read, I usually go on the bestsellers list, or I go onto Amazon to see what's highly rated, or I go on social media to see what everyone else is reading. And what ends up happening is I don't enjoy the book as much as everyone else seems to. I have to really force myself to try and finish it, and it makes me think, damn, I really don't like reading anymore, when it probably just wasn't to my taste. I used to just go into bookstores, pick up books, read the blurb, and read the first few pages to see if I liked the narrative and to see if I could get into it. And I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I definitely judged a book by its cover. And I found that looking for books in this way used to be way more fun and so much more rewarding, but also it lowered my expectations. So if I picked up a book and it was boring, then okay, I'd put it down. But if it was really good, then I would be so hooked. But the problem is, when you read a book that everybody else seems to be talking about and you can't get into it, you feel like you have to force yourself to finish it because you want to see what everybody else is going on about. And it just makes the whole process seem really draining, as if you've got a teacher telling you to finish your homework. So the first change that I'm going to make is to find my own books to read by browsing rather than relying on bestsellers and recommendations, even for books that I plan to read on my Kindle. And if I start a book and feel like I don't enjoy it, I'm going to actually put it down and just forget about it rather than trying to finish it. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I have to read books that are classics or books that are for adults or more high-end. I don't know how to explain the types of books that I mean, but I just feel like the book police are going to judge me for reading guilty pleasures or books that are written for young adults. I think especially because on social media, I'm constantly seeing what other people are reading. Their book lists just seem so refined that I feel guilty or almost behind in life for not being at that same level. But you know what? Reading is meant to be fun, so I really need to stop caring about what other people think. I watch reruns of Friends every single day, and I don't care what people think about that, so I'm going to try and carry that same energy to books. So change number 2 is to stop being a snob and read whatever I want to read. Ali Abdaal reads Twilight for crying out loud, so you're definitely never too good for any book. When I was younger, I read purely fiction, and it felt like this really nice hobby or escape. Then I read my first self-improvement non-fiction book, and it started off this chain reaction where that's all I would read. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love both fiction and non-fiction. I think both of them provide just as much value. The problem is, at some point, I thought that I should just read non-fiction books only because books are meant to help you learn and become smarter, and for some reason I kind of neglected the value of fiction books. But the problem of reading just non-fiction is that it really does make you feel really switched on. I feel like with non-fiction books, I have to sometimes write down notes, or sometimes it'll make me think of ideas for YouTube videos, and I'll get really distracted. The other problem is these books get repetitive, and eventually I got bored. But the thing is, I got bored of self-improvement books, not books as a whole, but it did put me off reading altogether. So the next change that I'm going to make is to be intentional with why I'm reading. Do I want to read to learn, or do I want to read for entertainment or escape? I'm going to follow my instincts and pick a book based on the mood that I'm in. This might be controversial. Don't get me wrong, I love having a Kindle. It's really great for traveling when you don't want to carry lots of books with you, and it's also really helpful when you don't want to store so many things. But here's an unpopular opinion. I think the Kindle made me read less. I still love using my Kindle, but I miss the feeling of a regular book. I miss the smell of a book, I miss the way the paper feels under my finger, and I even miss the sound of each page turning. And even though it's not a screen in the conventional sense, when I want to give my eyes a break from my laptop and my phone, reading a Kindle just doesn't feel like what I need. I don't know if I'm alone on that. The other problem with a Kindle is that mentally it's really hard for me to register what I'm reading. So I used to read fiction at night or as a break, and then I'd read non-fiction in the mornings. But now, because I use one device for everything, my mind just can't differentiate between what's a break versus when I should be more switched on. It's all kind of just blurred together. So reading just feels less good to me as a whole. And the third reason I think the Kindle has affected my reading is I don't feel as motivated to read anymore. With a real book, you can physically see how much you've got left to get through. You know you're almost to the end, so you get really excited and you decide to read the rest in one sitting, desperate to get the end, and it's such a great feeling. But with a Kindle, you just don't get that. I mean, I know it's got the percentage to say how much you've got left, but for me that just doesn't feel like the same. And the fourth reason is I just miss being able to wake up and see all of my books. I think bookshelves are so beautiful and I really miss them. So I'm really torn here because Kindles are really convenient, and especially being in a small flat, I don't have a lot of space. So here's the fourth change I'm going to make. I'm going to continue reading non-fiction on my Kindle as the highlight feature is super helpful. But for fiction books, I'm going to go to the library more or borrow books from family and friends. I think the internet and social media has definitely shortened our attention spans. I think especially because I spend a lot of my day scouring the internet for articles. I end up reading a lot, but I read articles in a very different way to how I read books. I read articles by glazing over them, trying to extract the most useful bits of information as quickly as possible. I'm looking for value rather than trying to get lost in what I'm reading. But this has now really affected my ability to read leisurely, because if I sit and try to read a book, I actually find it really difficult to focus for long periods of time without getting distracted or impatient. And it's really not good, and I hate the idea of social media and the internet changing my brain and the way that I read. It should not have that much power over me. So change number 5. I really need to reassess the time that I spend online and have healthier boundaries, especially as a content creator. I think I'm pretty good for not going on Instagram or TikTok much, but I really counteract that by spending a lot of time on Twitter, watching YouTube videos, reading articles and newsletters. So now I'm going to get a bit strict with myself and set more limits for how much screen time I have. The last time that I read anything close to a book or two each month was when I was working in London. I'd spend almost 12 hours a week travelling on the train and tubes. But now I drive to work or I work from home, and ever since COVID, I go to London a lot less. So it means that I have to make more of a conscious effort to make the time to read, whereas before that time was pretty much made for me. I've also noticed that since living with my husband, I read a lot less. If I was on my own, I would spend the evenings doing creative things, and I would have a set bedtime and make sure that I read before that. But my husband comes home from a long day of work and likes to unwind by putting Netflix on. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love watching Netflix, but it means my husband is a lot less structured and has a lot less of a routine than I do. He likes to go to bed whenever he's tired, and I like the idea of going to bed at the same time as him, so it means that I often skip out on reading. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to carve out some time to read during the day. Right now, I'm thinking that I'll read first thing in the morning with my cup of tea, in between meetings, and whenever I need a break. I'm also going to go to bed first to read at a set time every day and stay in bed reading until my husband is also ready to go to sleep. I already feel like there's so much pressure to do so much in a day, but we simply won't get everything done. That's why I'm not setting a challenge like reading 52 books in a year, something I previously would have tried. Instead, I just want to take away the pressure. The pressure to do more because I feel like I should. The pressure to read a certain type or number of books. I want to let go of that pressure and simply read whatever I want, whenever I want, simply because I want to. I miss getting lost in a book, so I hope this is the way to get lost again.